Tonight's meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission. I would like to, first of all, start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Commissioner Topchin, can I call on you to say the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would like to acknowledge, the City of West Hollywood would like to acknowledge the land on which we gather and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood as the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Cheech peoples. We'll now move to a roll call. I'll ask our secretary to please conduct that.
Commissioner Goldman?
Here.
Commissioner Krupes?
Here.
Commissioner McCafferty?
Here.
Commissioner Paris?
Here.
Commissioner Topchin?
Here.
Vice Chair Rory?
Here.
Chair Bass?
Here. We're all here, so we have a quorum, and we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the agenda. Have you all had the chance to review that, and are there any changes?
Chair, I had one suggestion if the commission is interested in maybe doing the appeal before the presentations.
How's the feeling of the commission on that?
I think the idea was to get them out early, but since they're here after hours.
Well, I'll move and see if there's any interest in having the appeal before the presentations.
There's a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Is there a second? I'll second that. Let's vote on that.
Commissioner Goldman?
No.
Commissioner Krupes?
No.
Commissioner McCafferty?
No.
Commissioner Paris?
No.
Commissioner Topchin?
No.
Vice Chair Rory?
Yes.
Chair Bass?
Aye. The motion fails. Is there an alternative motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Goldman?
Aye.
Commissioner Krupes?
Aye.
Commissioner McCafferty?
Aye.
Commissioner Paris?
Aye.
Commissioner Topchin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Rory?
Aye.
Chair Bass?
Aye. The motion carries. We'll now review the minutes of March 13th, 2025. Have you all had a chance to review them? Are there any changes or a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Goldman?
Aye.
Commissioner Krupes?
Aye.
Commissioner McCafferty?
Aye.
Commissioner Paris?
Aye.
Commissioner Topchin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Rory?
Aye.
Chair Bass?
Aye. That motion passes. We've now moved to item number 6, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone in the public to address the commission on items within our purview. Do we have any public comment at this time?
No public comment.
There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting if somebody chooses. Item number 7, the manager's report. Mr. Kessinger, may we have a report?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I hope you all are well. And I wanted to extend a warm welcome to my colleagues, Serena Molina and Christine Shen, who are both returning to present to us tonight. I know that they both spent a lot of time preparing information to share with the commission to make sure we're well informed and have a productive conversation. So thank you both very much and welcome. Tonight we'll be hearing one appeal, and we have the 2 presentations listed on the look-ahead calendar, returning for Long-Range Planning Division, the Equitable Building Performance Standards, and the legislative update for 2025-26 legislative session from Community and Legislative Affairs Division. On April 10th, April 24th, and May 8th, we have 3 appeals scheduled, and 2 appeals scheduled at this time for May 22nd. That concludes the manager report and look-ahead calendar review, but I am available for any questions the commission has at this time.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of the manager at this time? Seeing none, we will move on with our agenda. We will move first to item number 8A, a legislative update for the 2025-2026 legislative session. Hernan Molina is going to provide us a report on that, and I just want to welcome the city's Employee of the Year. It's an honor to have you at the commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm Hernan Molina. I'm the Governmental Affairs Liaison. I have the pleasure to know and meet most of you. I have not met some of the commissioners. It's my pleasure to meet you tonight. Let me start by saying that I've been with the City of West Hollywood for 24 years this year. I've been doing this kind of work since 2012 when I was no longer the deputy to then council member John Duran. When I met some of you, like Commissioner Topchan or my former colleague, former council deputy, Josh Kerpis, Commissioner Kerpis. And so I've seen great changes in the legislature, particularly in the things that they tackle and how they tackle it. For those of you who do not know, we obviously have a Community and Legislative Affairs division. I am the Legislative Affairs person for the city, and we retain the services of a lobbyist, of a lobbying firm in Sacramento, Shaw, Yoder, Antwi, Schmelzer, and Leng. Is a mouthful. Sylvia Solis-Shaw is our lobbyist. Helene Meshar was our lobbyist for many, many years, almost 28 years. She retired about 3 years ago. Ooh, this is not secure. And what we do is every legislative session, which this one just started in January, we identify a number of bills, and from those bills, we pick the most relevant ones. I looked up yesterday, and I don't recall the number exactly, but since December, when the session was unofficially started, and that happens because legislators are sworn in December, legislators introduced about 2,600 bills. We have a list of about 385 bills that we are keeping an eye. Keeping an eye, it's a misnomer, but let's just leave it at that. As I mentioned before, the session just started. It's a 2-year session, so we are at a point right now where bills are starting to be heard in committee. The last day for bills to be introduced, regular bills, was February 21st. And the legislature, perhaps, if you don't know, has a rule that bills have to be in print and nothing can be done for 30 days. So in your packet, which I provided to the commission staff, to my colleague Brandy, an updated report, which was printed today, which has the latest status for each bill, you will see in some of those bills that there is still intent or spot bills, meaning that there is not really substantial information as to how the bill will change statutory laws. And from on this report that you have on your hands, which has 13 initiatives, I want to highlight 3 or 4 that we are in the process of writing letters of supporting. I'll start with AB 246, which we are already on record supporting. We believe that it's important to address the price gouging in Los Angeles County after the fires. There has to be a cap in rents. This bill has a major hurdle. It is an urgency statute, and because it's an urgency statute, it requires 2/3 votes. When an urgency statute is approved by both chambers, the governor signs it and the law becomes effective the day the governor signs the law. And that is the difference. And of course, there is a sense of urgency because of what happened to so many people here in Los Angeles County. One of the things I know, and we had a legislative briefing today, and our lobbies followed up, is that not unlike other tenancy-related bills like Ellis Act, changes to the Ellis Act in the past, or changes to Costa-Hawkins, this bill also is facing opposition, obviously, from the apartment association and also the realtors. And Democrats, who hold a supermajority in both chambers, are not solidly behind these kinds of bills. because there is a block in both, there are blocks in both houses of moderate Democrats that tend to side more with realtors and sometimes landlords, particularly mom and pop small landlords, which are very present in Los Angeles, in San Francisco. The other issue is that this bill really is focused on Los Angeles County. So for people, for legislators who may be Democrats in the Central Valley, why would they oppose the realtors and the apartment association when the bill is not really going to impact their constituents? And this is something that we have seen in many times on bills, particularly with rent control bills. I don't want to take my time, too much time on each bill because I know that you have a business, and my colleague Christine Shen is also going to present on a separate topic. But if you move to page 2, AB 311, dwelling units, persons at risk of homelessness, this is also a bill that is part of this urgency, these bills that were put together at the request of the speaker and different, and I'm talking about Speaker Rivas, different legislators have come forward with different bills to address the request. We believe, because we have a strong, not just strong housing policy and tenancy related ordinance, but we also support the issues. We have a homeless initiative, and we are not just trying to get people off the streets into housing. We also want to do what the County of Los Angeles and other counties are doing, which is to prevent homelessness. And this bill is a way to prevent homelessness and not have tenants get into trouble if they are able to host someone who has endured loss. We think it's a common sense, and we are going to support the bill. Of course, because this is a work that I like to do collaboratively with the Commission and the advisory board members, if you have any input or ideas, I would like to hear now or via email, because all your input is something that I value and we would like to obviously take into consideration. Another bill that I highlighted to mention to you today is something that we have heard consistently, and it's on page 3, AB 414 by Assemblymember Pellerin, residential tenancies return of security deposits. This has been an issue. Tenants, I'm not talking about all the time, but I'm talking about tenants sometimes exit their unit under the belief that they're going to get all the security, and sometimes, even though they may leave the unit in pretty good condition and some things were worn out because they lived there for 15 years and perhaps the landlord didn't update it and the tenant didn't think to ask for an upgrade or anything like that. I've been a tenant. I never really called my landlord, can you paint my apartment? I painted it myself. Obviously, I told him I'm gonna do it, and I didn't paint it black or red. I just painted a similar color. So I had common sense, and I think a lot of tenants have that common sense. And this bill basically will regulate better how the security deposits have to be returned. And specifically, if the tenant was able to pay the security deposit electronically, the landlord will be also obligated to do it the same way. One of the reasons for that, I imagine, and I haven't seen the committee analysis, is because sometimes the checks get lost, and or someone left the state, or we need the money today. We don't need it in 2 weeks when the check gets to us. And today it's so common to be able to pay with Google Pay, Apple Pay, Venmo, your rent, that should be also a possibility. On page 4, there are 2 bills, AB 628, hiring of rental property dwellings and tenability. It would make a requirement, if these bills were to be approved, it will be a requirement that the tenability requires that there has to be a stove and a refrigerator that were purchased within the last 10 years, and they had to be in good working order. I am not an expert, to be honest with you, on the rent stabilization ordinance today, but I don't believe we are requiring specifically for a stove and refrigerator to be part of the housing services, something that I would think also is common sense, correct? AB 924 lists termination of tenancy, abuse of or violence, security deposit. On our legislative priorities and the city's Women's Advisory Board, LGBTQ+ Commission, and former advisory board member, I'm confusing the advisory board, Alex Paris. What I'm trying to say is that the city has a big commitment to preventing domestic violence, interpersonal partner violence. And not only we have an annual event, but we also fund a clinic, support services at the LGBT Center for domestic partners who are victims of abuse. And this bill, particularly, will be able to, if a partner exits the unit due to domestic violence, would be able to get a prorated portion of the deposit without having to deal with the abuser to be able to be made whole, correct? And exit the tenancy, provided that is able to provide evidence of the circumstances, and the landlord would have to comply with that. This bill basically is consistent with the work that we do, and those are some of the things we looked at. Finally, there is a bill that I think the Commission would agree that we should support, which is SB 381 by Senator Wahab. She has had quite a bit of bills on rent control and tenancy-related bills. I believe that she represents San Jose, which is a very proactive, pro-tenant city. This will limit the kind of fees that landlords can charge upon entering and upon exiting a tenancy. And we have heard over the years that when a tenant is leaving and gets the itemized fees or the things that are being deducted from the security deposit, then there are all these bogus fees as a way of the landlord not to return the amount. So this will limit the fees, and that's something that obviously, if it gets approved, we would have to comply, and I think we should definitely support. And then there is another bill by Senator Wahab, which is it's in the last page, SB 522, Housing Tenant Protection, Rent Control. This one will exempt, and this is there is a repetition. You see how today our tenants, our rent control basically works by the city establishing July 1st, 1978 or July 1st, 1979. I always confuse Los Angeles, I think it's 79 and we are 78 as new construction to the threshold for new construction. There has been an effort in the state to make that threshold 15 years upon the date of the building receiving the certificate of occupancy. What that means is the new construction, what is considered today new construction with that threshold of 15 years could be something that received a certificate of occupancy in 2010, correct? In 2030, it would be 2015. Well, this one will exempt from the rent control requirements on the rebuilding of a unit if the unit was burned during the fires or a natural disaster. So these are things that I think make sense, particularly if the landlord faces a major loss. We want the unit to be built again, obviously, for housing, even though it may not be rent control, but we want more housing because we need to have a variety of housing available to get out of the housing crisis that we are. And as you know, our city council over the years all of the city councils, and I've worked here, as I said before, for 24 years, has been very supportive of production of housing and creating land use regulations that do so, while also protecting our housing stock, which is affordable by nature of being rate and stabilized. And with that, I don't think I took too much time, and I'm available for questions. I know that Commissioner Kerpis already threatened me with a laundry list of questions, so he will do that at his own consequences, or peril, let's put it that way. Any questions?
Do any of you have questions? Okay. You'll follow up via email. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for your presentation. Very informative, and congratulations on the Employee of the Year.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate when you make these reports.
And I promise to come back before the end of this, the year one of the legislative session, so we can review the status of these bills. And if you have any questions, we will talk. One thing I do want to mention, there is another bill, and I'll just mention it rather quickly. There is an algorithm that apparently landlords are using. I would assume, and I assume is a good word, that housing corporations, large corporations are using, and that algorithm takes a look at how rents are being set by different units, and it basically uses that to do an averaging and set housing prices. We know that our salaries, and anyone's salaries, is not set by such an algorithm. We have been approached by, I believe, the author or council member in a different city, and I don't remember exactly who was, for us to consider this ordinance. We are looking into it, and when we are and take it to the council, I guess it will come first to the Rent Stabilization Commission for you all to consider that. I would think that's the most appropriate pathway for the bill. So with that, I don't want to take more of your time. I really appreciate the time that you allowed me to present to you, and I look forward to seeing you again. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Molina.
We will now move on to our next item, item number 8B, Long Range Planning Division Announcement of Equitable Building Performance Standards. And I believe our report is from Christine Shen, right? And before you begin, I want to take just a moment of personal privilege here. You're back in large part because I asked you to, and I just want to thank you very much for your additional time to the commission and the incredible thorough information. I am excited about the conversation our commission will have, and I just want to personally thank you for taking that additional time and apologize that you're back again, but I'm very excited about this conversation, so I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay. Happy to be here. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is Christine Shen, and I am the Senior Planner in our Long Range Planning team that is working on developing these equitable building performance standards, which aim to improve the energy performance of existing buildings in West Hollywood, and is a critical program that we need to meet carbon neutrality by 2035, which is set by WeHo Climate Action. So in December 2021, City Council adopted WeHo Climate Action, which establishes a path for the city to meet carbon neutrality by 2035. To meet that goal, the city needs to address the emissions that come from our buildings, which account for more than half of the city's total greenhouse gas emissions. And the city's building emissions are also more within the city's direct local control, as opposed to the transportation emissions, which depend on the regional transportation network that we are a part of. To meet carbon neutrality, the city needs to reduce our emissions, our total emissions, by 78%, which means that we have to decarbonize 80% of the city's existing buildings. And this is why City Council directed staff to develop equitable building performance standards for existing buildings. And existing buildings are really important because WeHo is, as we all know, a very built-out city, and the energy codes that come out every few years have helped our new construction be more efficient and healthy, but that doesn't improve our existing building stock. And a lot of the buildings in West Hollywood were built before there were any energy codes, so there was no insulation required. So if we want to reduce emissions from our buildings, we need to know what buildings have the most impact in the city. So the team analyzed West Hollywood's buildings and found that there are just over 5,100 buildings in the city. 76% of those are residential, and when we look at the greenhouse gas emission impacts of the city's buildings, we see that multifamily housing accounts for most of the city's building area and correspondingly produces the most greenhouse gas emissions, and the majority of the emissions we see come from natural gas usage. Looking closer at the city's residential building stock, we see that most of the city's residential buildings are multifamily, renter occupied, rent stabilized, and built before the 1980s. And as I mentioned, that's before the state's modern energy codes. So without requirements to improve these existing old buildings, they will continue to operate inefficiently as they have been for over the past 40 years. Sorry, 40. So based on our findings, we focused a lot on, for our first initial phase of engagement, on affordable housing and rent-stabilized stakeholders. So here are two quotes from a rent-stabilized tenant and an affordable housing owner. We found that tenants want to see improvements in their homes to support comfort and affordability. As this tenant has shared, insulation is something that comes up again and again in our conversations. Tenants share that even if they have air conditioning in their units, they are reluctant to turn it on because of the impact that it has on their energy bills. And because their units are poorly insulated, they have to have their AC on running constantly to bring it up to a comfortable temperature. So that's what we're getting. So this is a challenge, especially during extreme heat events, and we're experiencing that more and more. On the building owner side, we hear from them that they want clear information on what they're responsible for with this policy, what kind of flexibilities are built in, and what support the city will provide to make this policy possible. So a building performance standard, it requires existing buildings covered by this policy to meet specific energy use or emission performance targets by a certain deadline. And through a trajectory approach that goes closer and closer to zero, the targets get more ambitious over time to reach enhanced performance. And the amount of work that is required to comply from a building depends on the actual performance of that building, which is hard to know unless we have the building data. So a policy that improves existing buildings not only helps the city meet our climate goals, it also has the benefits of creating healthier and more comfortable homes when you don't need to use as much energy to cool or heat your space. It also has, because of that, the potential to save community members money on their energy bills. And then buildings are also incentivized through this policy to add on-site solar and battery storage, which helps with resiliency. So we typically see building performance standards target the largest buildings in a city since those have the highest greenhouse gas impacts. Our team looked at a few different building threshold scenarios, and we're recommending a 20,000 square foot threshold, which would mean all buildings larger than 20,000 square feet, which would be, let's say, 20-unit apartment, would be subject to this policy. And since West Hollywood has about 5,000 buildings, a 20,000 square foot threshold would only impact 6% of the city's buildings, which is 310 buildings. And you'll see from the chart that 219 are residential, and of those, about 100 are rent stabilized. So in terms of direct impacts of this policy, building owners will be required to report their energy usage annually and then meet energy performance targets every 4 years starting in 2028. And on the tenant side, the tenants will ultimately benefit from the upgrades to their homes. We don't expect rent-stabilized tenants to experience past cost throughs, and those are not being proposed as part of this policy. However, these maximum allowable rent protections generally do not extend to non-rent stabilized and commercial tenants. So those tenants may experience increases that reflect the cost of the work. So now I will dive a little deeper into what we're asking building owners to do and how the city is going to support buildings each step of the way. The first part is annually reporting their energy usage starting in 2026. This is already required of buildings over 50,000 square feet by the state of California, and there is already a platform that has been set up to help building owners do this. It's the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, but to further support benchmarking, the city can develop a help desk that can provide one-on-one support to our building owners to navigate the requirements and how exactly to connect their energy usage to the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and we can also offer education and training on the side. As I mentioned, building owners, this is the second part, building owners are going to be required to meet performance targets in 2028, 2032, and 2036. And those targets will be different based on the different building types that we have in the city. So not everyone is going to have the same target because we have a large range of buildings in the city. So to improve energy performance, there's a wide menu of options that building owners can choose from. As you can see, these upgrades are no different than what has been done in buildings for decades. We replace water heaters, space conditioning equipment, and these other equipment routinely happen without a building performance standards. The difference with this building performance standards is that it shapes the technology selection and the performance outcomes of these retrofit choices. So many of these technologies that would be incentivized through the policy save more energy and are more efficient and smarter. So to support better and healthier buildings, the city is exploring developing a retrofit accelerator that would help offer financial assistance and resources for building upgrades, because we do know this will take time and money. We're also exploring looking into providing hands-on technical assistance for our rent-stabilized buildings and affordable housing buildings so that they're not bearing the brunt of this policy. We want to make it as flexible and supportive and realistic as possible. And I'm happy to announce that the city was recently selected to receive a $250,000 grant to actually help implement this policy, and we specifically applied for actually helping the building owners pay for these upgrades as well as energy audits. But we definitely need more money. So the city can mitigate all of these impacts by, as I mentioned, providing technical assistance through the help desk, retrofit accelerator, and hands-on support. We can also provide financial assistance, which is to help cover the cost of all these things, which is what we just won some money to do, but we're definitely need to explore other funding opportunities and are definitely have our eyes out and eyes and ears open to be aware of what's happening in this space. And I'll go over in the next slide of some other opportunities. But offering these supportive programs will cost money. So that's something we're very well of, and we know that we need money to support our building owners. I also want to mention that the proposed policy also offers flexibility to our building owners who are unable to meet the targets. We're going to allow folks to prepare a plan, a long-term action plan that will kind of provide a timeline of how they're going to meet the targets of this policy. This allows them to time the upgrades with the life cycle of their appliances and systems that will eventually need to be upgraded, so that they can time this. We're seeing this as a way to providing building owners with resources to make decisions that help their buildings and their investment, their tenants, as well as support the city's climate action plan. So here is a sample of programs that offer financial and technical assistance for better buildings. And although there are going to be less federal grant opportunities with this current administration, there are statewide and local incentives and programs coming online to support building decarbonization. I'll just talk about a few. The California Energy Commission is launching a statewide direct install program and statewide incentive program that will offer loan options for doing this work. Southern California Regional Energy Network offers multifamily building owners incentives as well as technical assistance to support upgrades. And we're currently working with USGBC, US Green Building Council California, to develop a building performance hub that will offer support to residents, contractors, and building owners. Also worth mentioning that West Hollywood is not doing this work alone. We've been coordinating with our neighbors in the city of Santa Monica and LA County, who are also developing a policy like this. And we're also working with many stakeholders in this space about implementation support. So we're going to be continuing to work closely with these organizations to make sure that these programs can all be easily accessed by our stakeholders and community. And in terms of the impacts to tenants, the city's rent stabilization ordinance protects our tenants from pass-through costs from these upgrades that will be required from the policy, and none are being proposed with this policy to allow pass-throughs. There are also relocation and displacement protections and provisions for rent stabilized and non-rent stabilized tenants alike. Additionally, the state has some rent increase protections for tenants that are not covered by the city's RSO. And more information on tenant protections can be found in the FAQ attachment of this staff report. So here's the timeline. We started this project last year with technical assistance and round one of engagement, which included surveying tenants and landlords through the RSO newsletters. We used that feedback to draft this policy, and we posted the policy on our website for stakeholders to review and provide feedback, and we're going through, I think we've come here and a few other advisory boards. And we plan to bring an overview of this policy to City Council in May, followed by a first reading of the ordinance in July. We're also hosting office hours, events, and workshops for our stakeholders and building owners, and really encourage folks to go to our website to sign up for updates, learn more about the office hours, and review the policy if you have the time, and share your feedback. That concludes my presentation. We'd love to hear from the Commission on what concerns you may have about rent-stabilized building tenants and owners that we should be aware of as we move this forward, and your thoughts on how we can minimize unintended consequences to vulnerable community members. Thank you.
Great. Once again, thank you, Christine. We really appreciate you being here. And I'd like to see Commissioner Topshin.
Yes, hi. Good evening, Kristen, and thank you for coming back. I was listening and paying attention and reading at the same time, and clearly this is an important program as I see the level of importance that is clear to me, but there are certain concerns I see here when it comes to the improvements part of the kind of older units or older apartment buildings. Mostly, as we know, they are, over 60% under rent control, right? The housing stock. And these are older properties, older buildings, and I live in one of those myself. So these buildings definitely need an upgrade, right? They really need an upgrade, and to improve the energy efficiency or sound isolation or whatever it is. Especially, I would put the windows as number one thing. Energy efficiency cannot go without the windows being replaced. The windows that we see sometimes, because I myself as I said, living in one of these buildings, and that really bothers me. And I see how many buildings and properties have these windows and that were probably installed in 1950s, probably even 1940s. So there is no way we can talk about any effectiveness of this program if we don't actually require, so that the owners replace these windows. I would say this should be number one thing. I don't know if there would be possibility to have a code that would require actually a property owner from certain, years built properties to replace this, or maybe the inspectors can go and make an assessment of the properties that have to, the windows have to be replaced, something like that. But this window thing is the most important thing, I think, in my opinion. Another point I want to make is for example, I'm reading here, low flow fixtures, shower heads, and faucets. I remember probably 15 years ago or 20 years ago, my landlord did replace those shower heads to make it more, to conserve the water or make it flow less than now. If we're going to go a second round of that, it's just, it frightens what's going to happen next. I mean, very soon they're just going to shut down the water. I mean, these type of things, we need to kind of be careful when we require something like this, because the landlords may use this as a retaliation against long-term tenants. They're going to come and replace the shower heads and the fixtures, and then the tenants will feel, okay, so there's no way I can, I can live here. I got to leave. I got to move. The same thing goes for the LED lighting. So I don't know, sometimes it's not healthy to have the LED lighting the entire apartment of yours, and whether it's going to be sufficient lighting for your health, for your everyday life. So we have to be careful with these requirements, whether this is going to be really impact those long-term tenancies in rent control units, how the landlords can use this, or if they will use them against the tenants. So those are kind of my concerns. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Goldman, I see you reaching for your button.
So I just want to second the sentiment about the windows. I live in one of those older units also, and I actually had to battle my landlord to replace one of those windows, even though it was actually broken. I had to have the city come out. They would not believe me that it was broken, and it was one of those units that was very old, and it was very obviously broken, and the city came out and had to force them to comply to replace that broken window. Meanwhile, there are two windows. They only chose to replace one. So I have one energy efficient window and one not so efficient window. And when they were replacing it, I think it would be good to consider something safety-wise. I work from home, and I was working, and the repair guys come in, and they just started smashing glass because they said, these windows are so old, we can't lift them out. We have to just smash them, and it was terrifying. So it's anecdotal, that's my experience, but I felt like, I second the sentiment about dealing with the windows, and maybe there's some other kind of assistance or help that we can give them so that a bunch of people are not dealing with smashing windows and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McCafferty.
I have a question about the implementation of this. So from our presentation, which was awesome, by the way, landlords are reporting on their energy use to meet these targets. And can you walk me through how it's envisioned, what happens, how you guys are tracking it, how do these laws get implemented, I guess?
Yeah, so we would have a reporting platform that would connect with Energy Star, and then the building owners would submit their building data, connect to their actual utility data accounts to that platform, and then Energy Star helps us compare, we can set the targets on the back end, and then they compare where this building is with with the target. So then we're able to see how close is this building to meeting the target.
And then, so is it something like similar to a zoning violation where it's flagged and there's a fine until they fix it that adds up and up, or?
So the way we have it, the fine structured, is that it also has some flexibility. We don't want to ding folks for missing it just by a little bit. So it's based off of how far they are from their target, and based off of a social cost of carbon, which doesn't exist in the federal government anymore. So we are going to have to figure out a better way to assign a value to that. But normally that value gets higher and higher as like climate change gets worse.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kerpes, and we'll go back this direction.
Thank you again for your presentation, and thank you for coming back. I think that I especially like the FAQs that you put together, excellent, and I think that resolved a lot of my concerns about what the impacts would be on tenants. Some of the things I just observed, though, I want to echo my fellow commissioners about the concern over windows, and I have the same concern about natural gas. I mean, natural gas was highlighted in there. My building is 12 units, doesn't apply to this, or wouldn't be affected by this, but all 12 of my units have natural gas heaters. All of them have natural gas stoves, or at least the older ones. I don't know what they did with the upgrades. And all of my windows, I have big windows, lots of light, but they're all those, well, in the middle it's the very thin paned glass, and on the sides it's those old ones that, like the shutter glasses that go up and down, that you can't seal at all. I mean, you can feel the wind coming through. So I know that you get a lot of bang for the buck for the big buildings, but it's really the ones, I think we could see an immediate benefit to a lot more people if we focused on things like natural gas and windows. Those are across the board. My other concern was, it seems like we never engage, we try to at times engage residents in these efforts, and the way our rent stabilization code is kind of set up is, depending on what the tenant starts their tenancy as, kind of depends on how engaged they're, or how easy it will be to engage them in future efficiencies, because it all depends on, like, my landlord pays, I guess everybody's probably pays their water, but I know some landlords also pay electricity and utilities for their tenants. So they have no incentive to, on hot days, to heed the warnings by the state. They have no incentive to reduce water usage during summer. I don't have any incentive to reduce. It's just me being a good person to try to cut back. So I think if there were ways that we could also make sure this isn't just a one size fits all, but one side responsibility. I know it doesn't have to do with carbon decarbonization, but a year and a half ago, I was at the farmer's market, and they gave out these little plastic buckets so that I can put near my sink, and I can put my food in them, so to separate my food from the rest of the garbage. I know our company, or our hauler has separated that out for years. I know that, but the fact that we started this program, we were going to try to do this, and eventually, I guess we're going to be required to do it, but I don't understand why it's taken so long to do things like that, that we really need to, if we're going to start a program, we need to continue on and push for it. The things that, the other concern, to kind of answer your question, but not exactly, was just more broadly, if we could think creatively about how, about the effective incentive programs to get more people involved, both tenant and landlords, and really to look at, so what is the landlord going to get out of this? So if they, by 2035, is that, or no, what year is it that they?
2036.
2036. So 2036, let's say a building went from bad to excellent, they met all their goals. What does that look like for the landlord? Are they going to have, at the end of this, and they've done all this work, are they going to have $50,000 of debt? Or are they going to have $50,000 of extra equity? Like, what does the end game look like, and how do we make sure they get there? And not just the numbers that we're looking at in terms of decarbonization, because we all benefit from that. I get that, but I just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that they can afford to do it, and they have something to look forward to as well in the end. And then the other part of it was, oh, that was it. That was it. The engagement of residents. And then the last thing I had was. Thank you again for the FAQs and for coming back tonight. Excellent presentation. Is there a next phase of this that will affect buildings less than 20,000?
So the reason we landed on 20,000 was because so the 20,000 square foot threshold impacts around 310 buildings. If we reduce that to 100,000, it would more than double the number of buildings to be like in the 700 buildings impacted, which would bring greater benefits to tenants, but we saw that we don't see a lot of building performance standards go that low just because it does require a lot of investment from our building owners. So we are exploring other ways we can help improve other existing buildings, like existing building reach codes, which would be triggered when a building pulls a permit for a major remodel. If they're already doing the work and opening up walls, we can add some ways, some electrification readiness, or remove the natural gas, things like that are being explored as well.
And just one final follow-up question to what you just mentioned. It triggered my memory of, there's a bill right now, you mentioned the word reach codes. There's a bill right now that would put a pause to those for the next 6 years, I think.
Yeah, AB 306.
Yeah, would that impact this program?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Murray.
Can I just follow up on that last part? I just want to understand the math. The current target is buildings of 20,000 square feet or larger, is that right?
Yes.
And that nets about 300 or so buildings, about 106 rent-controlled buildings.
Correct.
And so if you reduce that 20,000 threshold to buildings of what size, are you going to bump it to 700?
So if we reduce that building threshold to, so let me rephrase this. If we have the policy impact buildings 10,000 square feet and above, we would impact 700 buildings as opposed to the 300 that we impact with the 20,000 square foot. There's a lot of numbers.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought you meant. So if you drop from 20 to 10, you're going to pull in more buildings. Makes sense.
Yeah.
My feedback was I thought that the 20,000 threshold is pretty modest when it only nets out 6% of all buildings, and then that's 300 buildings total and 106 rent stabilized. So if that's kind of where we're set, then I think that should be touted as a very modest goal, a very reasonable goal. That doesn't seem overreaching to me at all. In fact, I feel like it's maybe we could be a little more ambitious, is personally what I think. This is such a bold plan. You don't want to go too big because these are major concerns of the landlords having to make these repairs, but maybe there's a possibility of going to 15,000 square feet, and then you're netting closer to 500 buildings, and that's roughly 10% of all the buildings that are affected. That seems still modest, but a little more ambitious than 6%. That was just my thought, but I don't know if that has already,
That's a good
been
comment.
decided.
Thank you. Well, we can make note of that in the report too.
Paris.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I want to echo the co-chair's thoughts, and maybe if it isn't too fuzzy, to maybe, as you're considering a mid-range of the square footage, consider adjusting the targets for the smaller properties to include like more access to the low-lying support for the less difficult things like changing out water heaters and gas appliances and light bulbs, et cetera, to be more efficient, and leaving the more laborious construction to the larger properties that may have more capital access. And then I was curious about the funding sources for the grant. And you mentioned there was the $250,000 that we had received, but as it is with the state of federal policy, what are we looking at that funding source drying up for our goals as they are stated for 2036? And what other funding mechanisms are we looking at to help the community reach these targets?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me get to that page. So the $250,000 we were awarded actually comes from our electricity provider, Clean Power Alliance, through their innovation fund. We're not seeing like too many other grants coming online. We had applied for DOE IRA funding, but that's not happening anymore. But there are incentives and rebates that are coming online. Like Tech has residential incentives for heat pumps, where if someone buys a heat pump, they get like X hundred of dollars back. The CEC program is something worth mentioning because it can benefit buildings that are not covered under this policy. Specifically, their direct install program will go into the homes and actually do the work on behalf of the building owners in the tenants' units for low-income households. So it would be, there are income restrictions for that, but there are also the statewide incentives are also coming online, but the final program has not launched yet, so we're not really sure what that's going to look like, but we know it's going to offer loan options for building owners to take on these upgrades. Yeah, we need more money to do the work, so we're continuing to chat with different cities and agencies about how we can actually help fund this, because developing the policies is the easy part. Actually implementing is going to take a lot of work. We're also, when we do bring this to council, we are going to give them an estimate of how much the support we think is appropriate for our buildings is going to cost, and they can decide if that's something that they would be willing to allocate budget for.
Thank you so much.
In terms of incentives, and this comes from a place of, wanting to, like pro housing stance, I guess. Have you given thought to, it's such a leading question, like waiving permitting fees for landlords for these projects? So if they're applying for permits to make these targets, like to waive fees or something like that, that doesn't cost money directly, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a good suggestion. We haven't thought of that, but we can definitely include that in like our staff report to City Council. They would ultimately decide if that's what they want to do, but that is a good way to incentivize or remove barriers for our building owners to do this work.
Thank you. A few thoughts, and first of all, I just really appreciate what we have here, and my colleagues who posed questions when you were here last, Christine, I appreciate how thorough those are answered here. I've got to tell you, the way my brain works, we have appeals and people say stuff at the podium here, but because I've read my packet, I'm able to put it in context with everything else. So just the way my brain worked, that's why I asked you to come back, is just because I needed to be able to think about it before I could form intelligent questions or have opinions. And so I just really appreciate that you anticipated a lot of those based on my colleagues' questions and were able to provide it to us in writing, so that most of them don't need to be asked tonight and provided. But I have a couple of things. One of them is about this I'm agreeing with Commissioner Rory, Vice Chair Rory, and Commissioner Paris about maybe lowering that threshold. And I don't need to repeat what they have said except to add my name to that. And just wondering if maybe there is, if we don't lower it as a requirement, if there can be some sort of, as we talk about a benefits package, an incentive for smaller buildings, even though they might not be required. You know, I'm thinking of low interest loans or things so that they can do this work without having to go into debt that will stifle them for a long time. One thing that comes up for me is, you had the screen that showed how long, you don't need to go back to it, but that talked about how long the work takes, and some of them weeks to months. I am concerned that a bad actor, and most of our landlords are not, but we do have an occasional one that is a bad actor, could use that sort of long-term work to kind of do the work consecutively rather than concurrently, so that it forces it past the 3 months. And I would just really want the city to be on top of that to, I imagine there will be cases where it will have to go longer than that 3 months on some of the really outdated buildings, but I would really like us to just make sure it doesn't happen. And I know with construction things run over, but we just need to not get people evicted in the name of energy efficiency. So that's where I know that there was some discussion about harassment. That's what I see as a potential problem for RSO tenants. And I know that there's no conversation right now about a pass-through like there was with the earthquake retrofitting, but I just want to suggest that if there is at any point that conversation, that it be a conversation about pass-through of the actual costs and not an increase to the MAR. And just differentiating those two things so it's not a in perpetuity increase, but just to cover the cost. Also, I think it was Commissioner Kirby's talking about the benefit to the landlords. I'll give you the example, and I have a rent reduction in my unit right now because there is a leak, and the landlord has determined, I'm reading into their non-action, so I won't suggest their motivations, but for 6 years now, they've chosen not to fix a leak, but just to come in every year or two and replace the wall. So for them, it is more beneficial to replace the wall and continue to let me have the reduction than to actually fix the leak that is damaging the wall. So there has to be an incentive to a landlord at some point in time. The reduction I'm receiving is not a big enough, it's a loss they're willing to take. So I just really think we need to make sure the landlords have an incentive here, besides just, you know, the city saying they have to do it. I'd like them to be more willing partners. And the last thing I want to say, just, you know, we've joked about it a couple of times here about the lack of federal leadership on this. And just, I'm confident I speak for my colleagues in saying I'm proud to be from a city that continues to take the leadership on this. And when the federal government is retreating, the city of West Hollywood is still leading the way. And much credit goes to our staff and city council for being the leaders on that. So it sounds like brown nosing, I don't mean it. I am actually genuinely proud of that, being a city for like that. So that's the end of my comments. Any colleagues have anything else? Then we will move on, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.
Do my colleagues want to take a break at this time before the appeal, before we get into the appeal, or should we move on? We will take about a 5-minute break at this point in time. here, and thank you all for your patience as we took a little bit of a break. We've now reached the appeal portion of our agenda. We have one appeal this evening. It is D4837 for compliance decision 1. The address is 1006 North Doheny Drive, number 10. And the way this process works, so everyone knows right off the bat, is the first thing we'll do is we'll get a staff report from our city attorney, and they will give us a background of this case. At that point in time, commissioners may or may not ask questions, and we will then go to public comment and the testimony from the two parties. Because this is being appealed by the landlord will go first. They'll have 5 minutes. They can divide that time in parts so that they have a rebuttal period if they choose to, but they have 5 total minutes for introduction and rebuttal, and then the tenant will have the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. They cannot divide their time. They will just have 5 minutes at that point in time. And when you're done speaking at the microphone here, we just ask you pause a moment in case commissioners have questions. So that is the process. I'll remind you as you come up, but we will turn to our legal counsel now to present. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Chair Bass, I just want to say you took my thunder of saying Employee of the Year. That was going to be my joke, but you're the chair, so you got that one.
Very few benefits of sitting in this seat, but I'll take that one.
You're right. You can have that one. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kellen Martz, legal counsel to the Rent Stabilization Commission. Tonight, as the chair said, we are hearing the appeal D-4837CD1, 1006 North Doheny Drive, number 10. And for people at home, CD is for compliance determination. This is focused on a compliance determination for the exterior painting of the building at the property. In this matter, the hearing examiner found that the painting was incomplete and uneven, warranting the continued rent reduction in this case. So the compliance determination request was denied. The landlord appeals the determination, saying that the findings were not supported by substantial evidence and they were not given an opportunity to review the inspection report. Staff believes that there is substantial evidence in the record to support the hearing examiner's decision and finds that the landlord had sufficient notice of the findings prior to the appeal deadline. I'll note in the procedural background at the top, those dates are accurate. Unfortunately, in 2A application hearing and initial decision, those dates are incorrect. So please refer to the procedural background. The tenant in this case has resided at the property since 2016. The tenant filed for a rent reduction citing multiple issues at the property. Relevant tonight again is the exterior paint on the property. The application was deemed D-4837. A hearing was held on the matter. The hearing examiner issued a decision and granted a rent reduction based in part on the exterior paint condition. Subsequent to that decision, the landlord submitted a compliance determination requesting that they had completed the painting work on the property. And again, it sought a determination that exterior paint had been properly completed. Tenant filed a timely objection stating that areas of the building paint were not painted correctly and were uneven. In this case, a compliance determination hearing was held. Subsequent to the hearing examiner ordered an inspection of the property by city staff. The inspection took place with 2 staff members from the Rent Stabilization Division. After reviewing their findings and photos, the hearing examiner issued a decision that again found that the painting work was incomplete and the rent reduction would stay in effect. The landlord appealed that decision, arguing the decision was not supported by substantial evidence, was in error, and was an abuse of discretion. The landlord specifically states that a walkthrough of the property was conducted, during which time the staff said that the paint was complete. The landlord says that there was a subsequent inspection later where the landlord was not there, and that's where they determined that the paint was not adequately completed. Lastly, the landlord argues that they were not provided with the inspection report in a timely manner under a public records request, which limited their ability to respond or correct any deficiencies. The question tonight is there substantial evidence to reasonably support the hearing examiner's decision regarding the compliance determination on the building paint? Staff believes that yes, there is substantial evidence in the record to conclude that the hearing examiner was correct. There was a visual inspection, there were photographs, and there was testimony from both parties. There was an inspection. The rent stabilization staff observed areas of uneven and peeling paint after conducting a follow-up inspection and provided photos of their results to the hearing examiner. So based on that, the staff believes that there is substantial evidence in the record. As to the issue of not getting the report, staff believes that they were provided notice of that prior to the end of the appeal deadline. They were given an email from staff stating those issues still remained. Staff recommends that the commission affirm the hearing examiner's decision in full, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any commissioners have questions of our legal counsel at this time? Commissioner Topchin and then Vice Chair.
Good evening, Mr. Martz. The last comment you said about the inspection report, you said staff sent the email. Can you repeat that or clarify? What did you mean?
Yeah, I can look for the specifics on that. But, yes, I can look for specifics on that. But in summary, there was a deadline to file their appeal. I believe, and the landlord can correct me if I'm wrong, but that they wanted to have that document to review prior to determining whether they wanted to file the appeal or not, and that limited kind of their ability to review the evidence. In the record, the landlord was given notice of the substance of that document, not the actual document itself, prior to that appeal period. So even though they didn't have the document, they were told that it had basically failed the inspection in the eyes of staff.
Yeah, and as a follow-up question, thank you for clarifying, but as a follow-up question, whether it's for you or Mr. Manager, does the procedure require, if there is an inspection report, to automatically, basically, or formally provide a copy to the landlord? No requirement such? Okay. That has to be requested in order to, I see. All right, thank you.
Vice Chair Ori.
Just a quick question, if the email to the landlord notifying the substance of the decision was part of the packet, and if you know what page, because...
Yeah, I'll provide that to you.
Once you find it.
Yeah.
And then on the legal standard for compliance determination, I just wanted to have you recite it. There needs to be, it gets a little wordy. I know we're looking at whether there was substantial evidence to support the hearing examiner's decision, and in this case, there was an inspection that was done that informed the hearing examiner's decision. On the compliance determination itself, could you repeat the standard? It's substantial compliance with whatever the issue is. So the building doesn't have to be painted perfectly, but it has to be painted substantially, I believe. And so effectively, the inspector here and the hearing examiner said that the building had not been substantially painted, and so the compliance determination request was denied. But is that the right standard?
Yes. So compared to our regular appeals, compliance determination has two substantial languages that are separate from each other, and you've stated them both correctly. One is the hearing examiner himself or herself has to determine whether the landlord substantially complied with the original decision. And so that's where you would say it doesn't have to be a perfect paint job, but they still have to have substantial compliance with whatever was ordered by the original decision. And then you, as the commissioner, still tasked, like you are in a regular appeal, with finding if there's substantial evidence in the record to support what the hearing examiner decided on the compliance determination.
And it's then when we say it's an independent review, it's de novo review of whether there is a substantial compliance. We're not really buying, but by the determination of the examiner, we can look at the same photographic evidence, and we'll come up with a different decision.
So you on the de novo, that's on questions of law, but questions of fact, you're only determining whether basically it's the reasonable standard. So you're not reweighing the evidence, you're just saying whether a reasonable person could come to that same conclusion.
I see. Thank you.
Additional questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, we will turn to the landlord at this point in time. I have 3 names listed. If you could just introduce yourself by your name, city of residence, and then tell us how you'd like to divide your time so the secretary can keep it.
Thank you. My name is Richard Marker. I'm counsel for the owner of the property. I've got with me Nydia Lobos. She is the off-site property
Can you
supervisor.
speak close to the microphone, please?
Sorry.
You can pull it down too.
Normally, I'm very loud. Nydia Lobos is with me. She's the off-site property manager. I've also got Jose Hernandez. He is the maintenance supervisor. As far as time, I probably would like to break it up into about 4 minutes and then 1 minute for rebuttal if necessary.
Okay. Our secretary will let you know when 4 minutes is expired.
That's great. I do want to, council mentioned an email, and there was some discussion about that. I've got the email, and it's not exactly what was delineated to you. It was an email of September 24 advising my client that there would be a report. And it did not indicate anything with regard to the property being unsatisfactory or the paint job not being proper. So my client didn't get the report until they actually got the report as far as what was wrong. The other issue that you should be aware of is that all of this is taking place in the first, second, third week of October. My client was stuck with having to appeal, and once they did get the report, to make the repairs, which they have done, or the additional remediation. And I understand that's not necessarily what's on appeal here, but you should be aware that my client stuck in this position of not having the report and not having the ability to challenge, did both things. They appealed, and they did the remediation items that were made by Ms. Garcia's report. So I just wanted everybody to be clear as to what that is and what took place.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Richard Marker. Again, I am counsel for the owner of the property. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to address you tonight. The proposed resolution 25672 in item number 10 really hits right on the screws, right on the nail, the item that is before you, which is, the question is not whether you could think of something differently or how you're going to evaluate evidence. It's about whether the landlord substantially complied with the decision of the hearing examiner. That's the standard. That's in your proposal for your resolution. That's the question. It's not about whether or not it's a perfect paint job or not a perfect paint job. It's about substantial compliance. In this instance, the complainant filed a request for a rent reduction, citing 13 items, never giving the landlord an opportunity first, as is required by the stabilization ordinance, to take care of these items. She instead used the rent stabilization department as her way of communicating a problem with the landlord. With regard to the items that are listed, and let's be specific as to painting of the building. Painting of the building was required by the hearing examiner. My client, almost immediately, within a month or two, painted the entire building. So in May of 24 through July of 24, my client paints the building, and all of the building. And if you guys will take a look at the inspection report by Ms. Garcia, Inspector Garcia, she advises in that report, quote, "The exterior of the building as well as the stairwells, walkways appeared to have been repainted." Well, that sounds like compliance. Quote, "The condition of the exterior paint was decent." Feels again like there's been compliance. We take umbrage with this idea that we've got to do more and better. This does not have to be a perfect paint job. It's supposed to be a paint job, a repainting of the property, which the examiner themselves indicated was the case in their own report. Now, did she have a problem with maybe some uneven paint? Maybe dirt, maybe not, we don't know because she doesn't identify exactly. Was there an area that maybe was chipped? Maybe, but one picture of a little bit of chipped paint does not mean that my client didn't substantially perform and didn't substantially do what they were supposed to do, paint the building. My client, the president of my client's business, spent 40 minutes walking the property, and at no time did two inspectors say to him, hey, you know, this looks like it needs to be fixed. You know what, you should take care of this. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It was, hey, this looks good. You did a good job, thank you. And that was it. And everybody walks away. And my client is of the opinion that we're done, we're good, we have complied. And then the inspection report comes out, and again, as I just quoted to you, yes, it's been repainted, yes, the paint job was decent.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there's 1 minute left, Ms. Thornton? Thank you.
Can we ask a question?
Yes. Some of the commissioners may have questions for you. Could you?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair.
Thompson.
Good evening, sir, and thank you for your the facts that you presented. Now, I have a question regarding the examiner's original decision from March 12, 2024. Did you have a chance to, I'm sure you did, review the order that the examiner issued? And the wording is pretty, in my opinion, when I read it, it's pretty clear. It says to paint the building exterior and whole and ensure that the paint does not peel upon completion of the work performed. So that, and by reading this and then reviewing the same inspection report that you mentioned in your comments, the inspector's comments also, or the observation is that there were a few areas in the exterior of the building where the paint was chipped and peeling, which is basically, which basically confirms that the building didn't fully comply with the order from the examiner. So my question would be basically, did you have a chance to review the examiner's order, the original order? And,
I did.
And, okay.
I did.
I just wanted
Do you want me to address the comments or just?
No, if you want to respond, I think you did. You said you read it because I wanted to understand that if you had a chance
Yes,
to read it. Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Vice Chair Rory.
Quick question. Do you have a page number to the packet where you were saying that the inspection report said the outside painting was decent?
If you take a look at page 1 of the inspection report that is dated September 20, 2024 by Diana Garcia, in the item number 1 where it says exterior building painting, and then she has results of inspection. And then it says the exterior of the building as well as the stairwells and walkways appeared to have been repainted. She does talk about a couple areas where she believes it was chipped and peeling, and she shows 2 pictures, Exhibit 5 and Exhibit 7, and then she says that the condition of the exterior paint was decent, some areas had dark spots. This is not a brand new building. This is an older building that is stucco. There's going to be uneven areas. There's no way to get around that unless you're going to strip the building and take it down to its studs and basically rebuild it. The building was painted in total, as she noted.
So that's page 354. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners with questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your time. You'll have 1 minute for rebuttal, and we will now turn to the tenant. I believe Christina, is it Geraci? Forgive me and please correct me on how to pronounce your name, but you'll have 5 minutes to speak. Please just introduce yourself by your name, city of residence, and you can begin at that time. We're having some technical difficulties. Just a second. Christina, can you let us know if you're there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. We are ready for you to go, and please let me know how to say your last name. I'm sorry that if I massacred it. Okay. You just please introduce yourself, your city of residence, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Christina Gerasi. I was residing in West Hollywood at the time of all of this. In regards to Mr. Marker's statements, he's provided unfactual dates. The building has never been painted in whole at any time, and he's contradicted himself during this meeting at multiple times. In the hearing that we held for the compliance determination held on September 11th, 2024, he stated himself that the building was completed painting in the beginning of August, and I quote, and Jose Hernandez, the field supervisor, stated that the building was completed painting on August 25th. So we've then received a date that Nydia provided in her request for an appeal for a compliance determination, that the building was painted and finished painted on March 14th of 2024. So we keep receiving multiple dates of the completion of the building, and it's because it's never been done. The building has still not been painted in whole to this day, and as the commissioner had stated, there was a compliance that stated that there needed to be no peeling, and Diane Garcia only mentioned a couple things that were finished painted, which was the railings, which were certain parts of the building, but did not say that the building was completed in whole, and decent does not mean substantial. The building is not in good condition, and it's a result of management's negligence. That's my argument. Thank you very much. I agree with the commissioner's decision, and I have no further comment.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if any of my colleagues on the commission have questions for the tenant at this time. Ms. Gracci? Yes.
Good evening, Ms. Gerasi. So you at the beginning you said at the time you were residing. What did you mean? Are you still in?
Yeah. So I had moved. So I was constructively evicted from this unit on January 5th of this year, 2025. Also as a result of management's negligence for a different issue. So I'm not currently residing at the property, but the timeline of this has extended beyond the time I was living there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just finishing up the loose ends of this case.
So you are not there since January of this year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the tenant at this time? Seeing none, we'll turn back to Mr. Marker for your rebuttal.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure there's anything necessarily to rebut. I'll simply say again, for the record, that when the inspection took place by the two inspectors on September 20, the building had been fully painted, as acknowledged in the report of the inspectors. So there's no question the building was repainted. The issue seems to be the question of substantial compliance. And I think as one of the commissioners mentioned, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the greatest paint job ever. It needs to be repainted, and the landlord is to comply with that which the hearing officer requested that they do. And they did in this instance. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions for the landlord before he sits down?
Just a clarifying question. So, gosh, I think it's the hearing that determines whether a determination hearing, a compliance determination hearing. Did you make this argument that it was substantially completed at that hearing?
There was a hearing. I believe the initial hearing. I don't believe I was present for the initial hearing. I think there was a challenge to that came after. I don't believe that I was involved in March of 2024.
I guess maybe I'm referring to was it March? What's the most recent determination? When I know the inspection happened after, right?
Correct.
But what triggered the inspection was a hearing right? Were you present at that, or
So-
was the argument that, I'm wondering if the argument was made that you were in, or that they were in substantial compliance at that?
Okay, there was the initial hearing, so, okay. Ms. Garachi files her claim in December 9 of 2023. There was a hearing that was held on March,
That's where the determination was made to,
that's March 12.
for a variety of
right.
issues, you know,
So
revelations.
prior to March 12, I believe there was a hearing. And there was a hearing, there was a ruling on March 12 from the hearing examiner. I'm not around yet, okay?
I understand. I'm only talking about the most recent hearing.
There was
the
a
compliance
hearing, I
determination.
believe, I want to say it was September maybe somewhere in that.
September 11th.
Okay.
And
so
the
there was,
inspection was September 20th. Sorry to interrupt.
right, no, that's good, thank you. So there was a September 11 hearing. I attended that hearing.
And I assume you made the argument that the landlord was in substantial compliance with the order.
Correct. Because there were several other items that.
Yes, but that was
so-
one of them that's been left over, or that.
Right, so we were picking off the items as we were going, and at that point, the building had been painted.
Okay, so you made the argument at that hearing that the building had been painted, and you believed that it was in substantial compliance to comply with the order.
And my understanding is that the hearing officer at that hearing
Then ordered
requested
an
an inspection.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure that the argument was that you were there, or that somebody was there to make that argument.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have one final question, if no one else does, and that is to the issue of the invoices. I mean, the hearing examiner in the decision says that, I'm just going to read it directly. Here it is shown by the testimony of the parties, including the respondent, that the work was not completed until after the compliance determination request was filed. This is on page 4 of the compliance determination, page 372 of our packets, but it's words from it. And so looking at the hearing examiner's recollection of the hearing, he says that that the invoice was dated August 12th, that the exterior painting began August 19th and was completed on August 25th, and yet the compliance determination was filed August 1st. Do you have any dispute with those dates?
I don't. There were several invoices that were provided for work that was done. So no, I don't have any issue with that.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Commissioner Paris, you have one, and then we'll go to Commissioner Topchin after.
I have a question for Council.
Okay.
In the packet, there is on, I believe, page 290, an invoice for partial paint on 2, I believe, elevations of the building that were provided as evidence of the completed work, but it specifically states that it was partial work, not the complete building was painted. And then following that, as late as August 20th, there are photos and evidence, and in the examiner's report that show several areas of the building that were not thoroughly painted or were chipped. So how do we reconcile the fact that there are on the one hand orders for partial work, and on the other hand clear absence of that work being completed as ordered?
I don't think you need to go and look to see what each invoice does or doesn't do. I think you just need to look at the inspection report by the 2 investigators or the 2 inspectors. They acknowledged that the building was fully painted. And that was the question. Was the building fully painted? Was there substantial compliance? I've seen the pictures where they say, yes, there's 6 pictures or whatever, and there's chipped here, and there's kind of miscolored here, and this might be dirt here. I've seen that. Again, it's not perfect. Nobody is saying that this was an absolutely perfect situation. Again, it's an older building. It's a stucco building. You're never going to make it perfect when you're repainting it. You can knock it down and then rebuild, and then when you as soon as it comes online, it's going to be perfect. we hope. But the bottom line is that your own hearing investigators, your own inspectors walked the property, acknowledged that the work had been done, it was repainted, and in their report, they say so. They didn't say the greatest job we've ever seen, they said decent. They didn't say that it wasn't painted or there was areas that weren't painted. They actually go on to say, hey, not only was the building fully painted, but the stairwells were painted and everything was painted. So at the time, September 20, if you're looking at a bright line, on September 20, that building was repainted, whether it was done partially in May, partially in August, partially in July. Okay. But on September 20, when the investigation, when they went out there and inspected the property with the owner, it was fully painted.
Thank you. Commissioner Paris, do you have any? Okay. Any additional questions for the landlord? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and thank you all for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
We will now turn. I know that Commissioner Topshin has a clarifying question. I do too, and it looks like Vice Chair does. So let's turn to questions before we turn to deliberation of staff.
Yeah, Mr. Martz, I don't recall any similar circumstance before or case. The tenant is no longer in a unit. That's how I understood since January. And how the outcome impacts the tenant if the tenant is not paying rent, if the rent reduction will be enforced. So how does it work?
It's a little bit outside of the scope because we don't know the facts of that, but in a compliance determination case, it goes back to the hearing date. So I think she said that it was January of this year, but this case goes back farther than that. So it might be a finite amount of time, but this also impacts all the other tenants in the building.
So we don't have to worry about that. Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair.
Question for council, am I correct in understanding that a hearing examiner can request an inspection report on a particular issue, receive the report, look at language that's worded by the inspector in the report, then also look at pictures that are supplied with the report and say, notwithstanding certain language in the report, I, the hearing examiner, believe there was not substantial compliance. So to the extent that, I don't want to say overrides, but negates other language in the report, the hearing examiner can make the decision notwithstanding whatever language the inspector puts in the report. Is that correct?
Correct. And the commission is tasked with looking at what the hearing examiner decides. He or she is the final decision maker. The inspectors are kind of an arm of that person. And I just do want to clarify one thing, your request earlier. It's at the very end of your packet, included with the landlord's appeals, and it was actually Gloria Viles's email to Manuel with the landlord. And it does state, Diane and I had a chance to inspect other areas of the building which revealed uneven and peeling paint. And that was October 23rd. And then the landlord's appeal said that they submitted a public records request for that on the 24th of October, and they had to make a decision to appeal by 11-4. So there was some indication that there were paint issues in the property prior to that.
Are those emails in the record, or are you just?
Yes, they are at the very, very end. So the landlord's appeal comes with their written explanation, and then following the appeal are several documents.
The page number?
I am looking at a different version, but it is the third or fourth last page, and it's right before the public records.
I believe it's page 540 in the packet.
Thank you, manager.
I have a question for you, and that is regarding the language I asked the landlord about of the work being performed subsequent to the application for a compliance determination being filed. How do dates factor into this decision? And I've raised this before, is, you file for a hearing and then the landlord does the work before you go to the hearing. That's great. We want the landlord to do the work. But how does that impact the case? And so here, just walk me through filing for a rent restoration, a compliance determination on let's see, August 1st, with invoices dated in September and testimony recounted and not disputed that it wasn't done until the end of September, a month and almost 2 months later.
Yes, so the short answer is it doesn't impact your deliberations or decisions tonight. The hearing examiner could have turned this down upon that, finding that information, but once they've made a decision, it negates some of those issues. So the appeal here tonight is on whether there's substantial compliance on the hearing examiner's decision. It's not on that technical detail, and so it's been kind of mooted, and I don't even know if the hearing examiner noted that, but once we've gotten to this point, it becomes a question of resources as well. So it's not before the commission tonight on that.
It is noted in the hearing. That's the reason it comes up for me, is it's part of the analysis. So that's why I'm trying to wrap my head around. He says that the work was not completed until after the compliance determination was filed. But then he goes on, notwithstanding this admission, the inspector. And so for me, it feels like it's part of the analysis, which is why I asked that question. But if you're suggesting it's not part of what's
correct,
before
because
us.
it's about what you're looking at, whether the building was painted or not the specific dates of those. And so a decision was made by the hearing examiner that the work was not substantially complied with to the original decision. So that's the dispute in front of you tonight, not whether the work was done. Had the hearing examiner wanted to deny the matter or not even take it up, they could have done that on that basis and said, hey, you need to reapply. I don't know what was going through their head, why they didn't do that. I may have said, shame on you, landlords, for filing ahead of time, but we're not going to waste everyone's time, including the tenants, including staffs, to deny this one or cancel it and then just make you refile next week.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you walking me through that.
Sure.
Commissioner McCafferty.
I have a question. Page 53 in our packet, which Commissioner Topchin read before. I just want to get clarity from y'all on the scope. So the part that says paint the exterior in whole, ensure that the paint does not peel upon completion of the work performed, that's key for me. Is that within the scope that I'm working with tonight?
To Commissioner Topchin's question, or will you repeat that for me real quick?
So it says on page 53, in order to have the rent restored, the owner is required to paint the building exterior in whole and ensure the paint does not peel upon completion of the work performed. It goes on for about
Yes.
splatter or whatever. Is that in my scope?
Correct, yes, because that is what the hearing examiner was looking at when the compliance determination was filed. And so you're looking at, is there substantial evidence of the record to support the hearing examiner's paint determination? Well, you can only make that decision if you know what the underlying ruling was for. So you have to go back that far. Obviously, you're focusing mostly on the compliance determination hearing, but it's based on that original decision, so yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Kerpes.
I have a process question. So September 11th is when the compliance determination was held, or the compliance determination hearing was held. The two come, they testify, they close the hearing examiner doesn't feel he has enough evidence to make a determination, or for whatever reason, he sends out a inspector on September 20th. The September 20th inspection comes back to the hearing examiner, and it sounds like no one gets to see it except for the hearing examiner?
Correct.
And so the hearing examiner makes a decision, a question that determines whether it's substantial or not, whether the compliance is substantial or not, without hearing any evidence or debate in front of them about whether it should be considered substantial or not, whether he saw the word, it looks like it's, or whatever the word was used by the hearing, by the inspection, that it looked decent. When would the opportunity be for that argument or that debate or that question of evidence to occur because it can't happen in the appeal, right? Because we're just looking at whether there was substantial evidence on what the hearing examiner made. When would that opportunity have to question the evidence in front of the hearing examiner occur?
Is your question, when do the parties
Yeah,
have an opportunity to respond to it? It's not evidence for them to dispute. It's a tool to assist the hearing examiner. So think of it like, and they don't have to do it. So he could have made his decision just based on the testimony and the photos provided by the parties. Think of it as if he, the day of the hearing or the next day, said, I don't think I have enough, and walked himself out to it, looked at it, came back, and using that knowledge, made his decision. So I understand what you're saying, that, it seems a little backwards, but again, they're not there to assist either party. They're basically an arm of the hearing examiner at that point. And so
I think I would normally agree with you on this, but I think because the hearing or the investigator did more than just inspect. They actually opined on the decency of the painting, which skews the evidence that's coming to the hearing examiner, I think. I mean, it's just my initial thought. It almost seems to me like, that's why I asked the question, did you make the argument that you were substantially in compliance at that hearing, which I suppose that's what they did, but then there was another bit of evidence that came to this that was opinion, that could have been debated and fleshed out more. So that's the issue I'm having.
Any additional questions, or shall we move on to deliberation? Anyone have thoughts they want to share?
Oh, okay, thank you, Chair.
First.
Yeah, would I be able to make a comment?
I'm sorry, the public comment is closed. Can we please have
Okay.
the Zoom muted? There will be an opportunity for public comment later, although we cannot consider anything else from the public on this particular hearing.
To me, the whole discussion about this comes to the original order by the examiner, where the examiner specifically said, and that's what I read, and then the fellow commissioner also mentioned that specific order where the examiner said specifically to ensure that the paint does not peel upon completion of the work performed. This is so specific in the way we've seen these orders before. And in a lot of orders, they don't provide the specifics. They would say just make sure that the entire building is repainted or painted. So, and without providing any detail or any information. When I read this and they said, this is interesting. So the examiners looked ahead and thought, okay, what if the paint, the building will be painted, but what if there will be areas with chipping, peeling paint left? So it's so interesting. When I read this, I said, wow. And then the whole discussion around the inspection report, which the way the inspector wrote it, I don't see really anything in this report that suggests there is substantial compliance. So, yes, it says that I've observed there is the stairways and walkways appeared to have been painted. Okay, there were a few areas in the exterior of the building where the paint was chipped and peeling. That was exactly what the examiner wanted not to see after the work is completed. And then the inspector says a few areas in the stairwell had chipped paint and one area had splatter paint. So just to focus on the word decent, I don't know what's the legal definition of the word decent, right? And that's not my job to look into that definition. But the whole testimony from the landlord's attorney tonight was basically based on the same report that says no, I believe there is substantial evidence, just because the word used in the report says decent. But I don't know if the word decent means substantial. But when I read the examiner's order with very specific order that says cannot be any chipping, peeling paint there, so then, and I'm reading this inspection report that basically says there are areas there with chipped and peeling paint, and these are not tiny little areas. We have the photographic images obtained during this inspection, and you can see the, there are big portions of some of the areas there are actually chipping, peeling. So now, as our counsel mentioned, we cannot reweigh the evidence. All we have to look into and say, is there a substantial, was there substantial evidence before the examiner to conclude that there is no compliance, substantial compliance? All we hear from the landlord's attorney is, no, there was no substantial, but there is no really evidence. There is no other things presented to the hearing examiner or to the commission that would suggest there is no substantial compliance. It's just the word decent. That's the whole thing, that the entire argument of the landlord's attorney was built on. So that there was a inspection report where the word decent was used, and that the exterior of the building appeared to be painted. So that's it. That's a substantial compliance, but that's not the substantial compliance based on what the examiner ordered, and based on the pictures and the photographic images obtained during the inspection, based on the results of the inspection, the report the examiner requested. I do believe the examiner reached the correct conclusion, and I don't see the examiner erred in the decision, and I'm prepared to support staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Commissioner McCafferty.
My assessment's similar. Again, page 53 saying paint the building exterior in whole, ensure that the paint does not peel upon completion of the work performed, and even goes on to say ensure that the paint is not splattered on the stairwells. Then you go page 354 of our packet, and it states the exterior of the building appear to have been repainted. There are a few areas where the paint was chipped and peeling, and a few areas on the stairwell where there's splattered paint. Exhibit 23, it's a stairwell with splattered paint. So because of that, to me, that's reasonable to state that that does not comply, and so I agree with staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Kerpes and Commissioner Goldman.
Yeah, I just want to make clear that my position is not to reweigh the evidence. My position is, my concern is that the landlord didn't have the opportunity to, the error that occurred in this case was allowing a report that opined on something, and then a determination was, I'm going to say, depended on that report to make a final decision, because they asked for the report. The decision wasn't made until after the report came back. The argument, I can't imagine what other argument would be made, but so we'll take the argument that was made tonight that they debated whether decent and substantial and all this other stuff. So that argument tonight should have occurred in front of the hearing examiner, so the hearing examiner could weigh all those things. But the hearing examiner didn't have an opportunity to do that, and the landlord didn't have an opportunity to argue that. If we were to, I don't even know if this is possible, but if we were to, instead of remanding, like you could do, but instead of remanding, we said, we're going to remand this, but we're not going to remand it back to the hearing examiner. We're going to weigh it right now and make a final decision. I would come down on the side that it was substantially compliant based upon the evidence that we've heard tonight. But, up until that point, though, I don't see how this is a fair process for the landlord in this case because of the opinions that were given in the case. I'm not arguing that it wasn't substantially compliant. I'm just saying that the way this decision was made wasn't fair.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldman.
So like a couple of my colleagues, I keep going back to this page 53. I had it highlighted because it's so specific in this instance. And when you look at even the inspector's notes here and the images, to me, I'm prepared to support staff's recommendation here.
My colleagues on the left, Commissioner Barris and Vice Chair Rory.
So I, bottom line, am leaning towards affirm. The question before us, I think, is whether there's substantial evidence in the record to support the hearing examiner's decision that there was not substantial compliance with the exterior paint job. It's kind of a wordy question, but we're not supposed to substitute our judgment. We can even disagree with the hearing examiner and think maybe there was substantial compliance according to our viewpoint, but if there's pictures and evidence in the record that would support the hearing examiner, notwithstanding the inspection report saying, no, I don't think there was substantial compliance with the paint job, then our job is to affirm that decision, whether we agree with it or not, if there was something we can point to. I think the pictures 5 and 7 that are noted in the inspection report clearly are something that the hearing examiner could have relied on, and saying that there wasn't substantial painting of the exterior. I think Exhibit 7 to me is probably the most compelling picture. When I look at 7, it kind of negates any argument that we heard tonight that the whole building got painted. I don't think that that's what the inspector said, that the building got fully painted. The inspector says that the exterior appears to have been repainted, but there wasn't a sentence that says it got fully repainted. And then the next sentence says there were a few areas where paint was chipped and peeling. So that right away says, no, the whole building hadn't been repainted. If there's chipping and peeling, you can't fully repaint a whole building and still have chipping and peeling. So the hearing examiner looked at the pictures and said, I don't think this is substantial compliance. And I appreciate the presentation tonight. I appreciate the arguments that were made, but I don't have enough here to reverse the hearing examiner, even if I disagree. I'll say on the condition, the one sentence that's kind of been noted is the condition of the exterior paint was decent. To me, that's talking about the condition of the paint itself. So it's not saying that the paint job was decent. It's talking about literally the substance of the paint the condition was decent, but that doesn't mean to me that the paint job was decent. And even if that's what it was construed as, the hearing examiner has the right to look at Exhibits 5 and 7 and say, I don't think there was substantial compliance with the order to paint the exterior. And the last thing on the procedure not being fair, I don't agree with that. I think that a couple things. One, we heard tonight, clearly the process is laid out, that the inspection is a tool that the hearing examiner uses. The report doesn't have to get provided to anybody, apparently, other than the hearing examiner. We're not changing the laws here or commenting, I think, on their fairness. We're here to kind of execute them. I will say if there was a little bit of wonkiness or ambiguity about whether to appeal or not appeal because they weren't sure about the nature of the report, to me it's a wash because they did appeal and they had a chance to come here tonight and state their case. They made a good argument. Appreciate them coming on both sides, but for all the reasons I mentioned, I think it was a fair process. I think the hearing examiner had their reasons for finding the way they did, and I don't see a reason to overturn that decision.
Commissioner Paris.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree to affirm the resolution. It seems to me that the examiner calling out specific expectations of the work being done were not met substantially, given the evidence of the inspection report in several of the exhibits. So on that basis.
Thank you. It would be easy just to say I second everything that the vice chair has said. That's generally where I'm at. But I once was called out on another commission by a council member for not stating clearly why I voted the way I did. So you always have to hear me say how I vote, because I'm a large commissioner, and I took that advice to heart. So I do want to share that I'm uncomfortable with the specificity about the chipping and stuff on the original hearing, but that's not before us. But because it is in the hearing, in the original decision, I think we do have to pay heed to it. And just like the vice chair was saying, our job is not to look at the evidence and make a determination, but rather determine if a reasonable person would have made that same decision, or could have made that same decision with the evidence before them. So I asked about the date technicality, and I think I would have decided differently than the hearing examiner were I in their shoes, and I think I would have decided differently than them on the substantial compliance. And yet those are not the questions before us. It is, could a reasonable person have come to those conclusions? And though I might have disagreed, I can understand why a reasonable person would have, based on the specificity of the original decision, come to those same decisions. The only place where I'm going to raise any sort of disagreement is just in our resolution. There's one sentence that I'm just uncomfortable with, and that is in the resolution number 9, the last sentence. It says, the inspector's report stated that the existing painting was incomplete and did not fully meet the requirements in the hearing examiner's decision. I'm uncomfortable that that's an accurate representation of what the inspector said. So I would ask if we could approve this resolution. I'm asking this of legal counsel, striking that one sentence. Could we still approve the same resolution without that sentence?
You can make any motion you would like.
I just don't want to make your life any harder. So I would prefer us strike that one sentence, because I don't think it's an encapsulation of the inspector's decision or report. But the sentence reads, the inspector's report stated that the exterior painting was incomplete and did not fully meet the requirements in the hearing examiner's original decision. I think she opined, but I don't think she actually made a determination as to whether it met the requirements of the hearing examiners. I think that's the determination the hearing examiner made based on the report. I don't think the inspector made that determination. So I guess I will make that motion. I will move resolution number 256772, a resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission of the City of West Hollywood affirming the hearing examiner's compliance determination as to application number D4837CD1, with the amendment that the last sentence of number 9 be deleted from the draft. I hear a second from Commissioner Kerpes. Ms. Thornton, may we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Goldman?
Aye.
Commissioner Kerpes?
No.
Commissioner McCafferty?
Aye.
Commissioner Paris?
Aye.
Commissioner Topchin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Rory?
Aye.
Chair Bass?
Aye. And the motion carries 6 to 1. Did I hear you? Did you correct, Commissioner Kerpes? Did you second that?
Did second that because that's the motion I wanted to go through, but I voted no because of the process.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, since your vote and your second
I know,
seem to
it's very
contradict each other,
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure my ears weren't playing a trick on me. So now that we've done that, I will, staff wants me to read that, first of all, the motion passes 6 to 1. And if the parties have any further questions, you can reach the Rent Stabilization Division at 323-848-6450, by email at rsd@weho.org, or you may request an in-person appointment online at weho.org under the services menu. Mr. Achi, you will now be placed back into the waiting room. If you would like to watch the rest of the meeting, you may find your other options to do so at weho.org/WehoTV. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a public comment period which you can make by Zoom, but we will take no more testimony on this particular item. So that is available to you on other items. We will now move on to number 9, new and unfinished business. Mr. Kessinger, we don't have anything, but I'm just reading from the script, so forgive me, I'm embarrassed. But we do have staff next, so anything additional from staff?
No additional items from staff, thank you.
It does actually say your name here and say I'm supposed to call on you, but I wasn't looking at the agenda. Okay, number 11, public comment. Do we have any additional public comment?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we move on to items from commissioners.
I was going to let the commission and staff know I won't be able to attend the next meeting on April 10th.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Goldman?
I just really wanted to thank staff for providing all of these materials and then also a really helpful flow chart. I really enjoyed being able to go through this before we had the presentation so I could review everything. So I just wanted to call that out. I really appreciated the presentations and the ability to look over everything in advance and come prepared. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will just second what Commissioner Goldman said. You don't need to hear my voice anymore this evening. So I will adjourn this regular scheduled meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission to be held on April 10th, 2025. I believe that's the date you just said, for sure, right? In West Hollywood Park Public Meeting Room, Council Chambers, which is this room. Have a good night.